Hi, I'm Anna Warwick Sears. I'm the Executive Director of the Okanagan Basin Water Board. And ironically, I was invited to come today to talk about a big drought planning project. And I went through some angst. I shared it with my Facebook friends and whether or not I should be rewriting my talk. And I decided that since next year could easily be a historic drought, I'd just carry on and just maybe weave in a few more words about how this kind of approach, collaborative partnership approach, and using it for regional planning is really essential to apply both to drought and to flooding. And I'll even go so far as to say that I think collaboration is reached the level of a new paradigm where you really can't get anything done at all unless you have some kind of synergy happening with a lot of different kinds of partners. When you work for a watershed governance organization like I do, a watershed agency, you get your hands dirty with a little bit of all different kinds of things. But you never do anything without partners. We're drought planning, water infrastructure, upgrade planning, climate change modeling. We're doing a big public outreach publicity campaign about zebra mussels. All of these things are beyond the reach of individual organizations or jurisdictions. For example, on Monday I was on a conference call to strategize how to get action on remapping BC's floodplains. It was an unusual group of industry and NGOs and scientists and business community. It was actually convened and led by the BC Real Estate Association. And when you have the realtors getting together with the insurance industry to become activists and leaders on better zoning for municipalities and environmental planning, you know that something is really changing. But the truth is, this is an era of small government. We have smaller budgets. We have limited staff capacity and support from government. It's a real adjustment for civil society, but it's becoming more and more obvious that we're going to have to pool our resources. So under these kind of conditions, there's all kinds of unusual alliances that can form. But the key ingredient, as Lauren mentioned earlier, is the leadership, because unless we have leaders, we're all just kind of mulling around, unsure how to get organized. So the next story that I'm going to tell is about how the Okanagan is really digging into this brave new world of collaboration and trying to be a regional leader for water sustainability in our valley. The first time I visited the Okanagan was in the early 1970s. It was in the back of my parents' Plymouth Valiant. There was no air conditioning, and I remember thinking, how could anyone ever live in this place? It is so hot. But my sister handed me some fresh cherries, and we got to swim in Osoyoos Lake, and then I understood why people live there. So I'll say that collaborative water leadership in the Okanagan really comes back to protecting that experience for every generation of kids, to experience the intense quality of life represented by that fresh fruit, by the clean water, and by having these really beautiful lakes to swim in. The prosperity of the valley has always been linked to water. It's an oasis in the desert. And older, young, rich or poor, everyone in the valley is an advocate for water. And because it's a small valley, collaboration is really an essential way of how we do business for the history of the settlement there. People say that you need a crisis to make a change, and the Okanagan Basin Water Board, my agency, actually started with a bad smell. It was the scent of poorly treated effluent that was rising from the lakeshore. The cities and towns in the valley knew that they had to do something about the pollution, and they knew that they couldn't be successful working alone because they would, even if they cleaned up their own wastewater, they'd get the wastewater from their neighbors. So they pooled all their political capital, they pooled their financial capital, and they formed this small agency to take on all these odd geographic boundary crossing water problems. So it's all funded on local property taxes, so it's an unusual agency in British Columbia and throughout Canada. And now 40 years later, our effluent problems are gone, and we're still leveraging that initial structure that began with that original collaboration. Now, this is you can see the map of the Okanagan Valley there, and it's easy to understand why Osoyoos, right at the bottom of the valley, would be motivated to collaborate. They say in Osoyoos that by the time the water gets to them, it's been through 3 sets of kidneys. But why would the people up there in Vernon be motivated? Do you remember the devastating fire that we had in 2003? That's Kelowna Mountain. They did a business analysis afterwards, and they demonstrated that any kind of major crisis anywhere in the valley because we rely so much on tourism, it has a major impact on the economies of all of the other municipalities in the valley. The entire income of the valley relies on the overall health of our environment. If people think of the Okanagan as being a place with good water, then it will reflect well on the entire communities. On the other hand, if one community has a cryptosporidium outbreak, it will get into the newspaper. They won't say, oh, it's Kelowna. They will say, the headlines will say, Okanagan, bad water quality problems. So it will impact all of us. So everyone is in the same boat. Everyone's in it together. The bottom line is that good water is good for the businesses of everyone. Another advantage of the upstream, downstream collaboration is that there's really strength in numbers for swaying the minds of provincial legislators. A few years ago, when there was pressure on the province to sell recreation lots on our drinking water reservoirs, this is our biggest drinking water reservoir, by the way, Okanagan Lake. Every local government in the valley spoke with a voice against it. We do allow development along Okanagan Lake, but the small upland reservoirs are particularly sensitive. Because every local government spoke together against recreation development on the drinking water reservoirs, we managed to get a moratorium on the land sales put in place. So water pollution has improved dramatically over the years, but with the flood and drought in 2003, the concern really shifted to water supply, and the local governments asked the Okanagan Basin Water Board to get more involved in water supply issues. In one very dramatic turn of events in 2003, the mayor of a municipality actually turned off the water to a fish-bearing stream to provide water to the local water utility. And then the following uproar, if you can imagine, between the federal fisheries regulators, the farmers, and the townspeople, just shook the surrounding communities. Everyone was asking, is this how it's going to be from now on? Do we have to make hard choices between all these different competing needs? So in the years that followed, we've become much more involved in modeling and assessing what our water supplies are going to be, and how do you get water to all these different kinds of users. When I give presentations about water in the Okanagan, many people ask me about the carrying capacity of the valley. They say, how many more people can we sustain? Should we be locking the door, not allowing new development? When are we going to run out of water? And so my line now is that population growth is inevitable, but water shortages are mostly optional. It's not just a one-liner. It's actually the summary of a massive multi-year collaborative water science study called the Water Supply and Demand Project. This project, which began with the intention of getting better prepared for future droughts, became a major initiative, first to create models of all the sources of supply, the snow, the water in the reservoirs, the groundwater, and all the different places that water was being used in the towns, in the agriculture, the water needs for fish. And then also to create climate change scenarios to look at what the future trends might hold. At one point, we had 4 provincial agencies, 3 federal agencies, 4 universities, and numerous consulting groups and technical advisors working together on the project, which we coordinated at the Water Board. This is what we're working on. This is the annual inflows to Okanagan Lake. This picture is from 1922 to 2006. Just gives you an example of how much the water supplies are fluctuating. So we're trying to manage in an environment like in Australia. They say they're the land of droughts and flooding rains. We have the same kind of situation going on. We also have, I like to say that we're members of the irrigation nation. We have a huge variation in the timing of water use. This right here is the winter water use, and this is the summer water use. This is all irrigation. So we have to create water management systems that incorporate that. In the end, all of the climate change scenarios that we did, and we did many, came up with the same basic conclusion, is that we're going to have warmer air, warmer winters, we're going to have longer summers, we're going to have an earlier snow melt, and we're going to have an overall greater summer irrigation demand that we have to plan for. We don't expect to have less precipitation necessarily, but more of it's going to come as rain than as snow. Our reservoirs are not sized to hold all that water. We have to release it down to our friends in the United States. And so we don't have that snowpack storage that we can rely on in the future. So should we build more reservoirs? This is sometimes called the big pipe solution. This is a picture of me in Australia. This is me. But the problem with that solution is that right now, as we said, all the good locations for reservoirs have already been used. Also, it's extremely expensive to put in these kind of pipelines. And it's possible we could try aquifer injection, but by far the least expensive reservoir is the water that we're wasting. So here's a nice pie chart. This is always the most popular slide that I ever have with politicians. The biggest place that we have for new water is what I call the domestic lawn watering reservoir. So if you look at this pie chart, the biggest piece there is the water that we use for agriculture. The second biggest piece is the water that we use on watering our lawns. So that's just sitting there ready to be reallocated to some more usable place. We are continuing to work on improving agricultural irrigation efficiency, but that's more of a kind of insurance. We don't want to have the farmers conserving on the amount of food that they grow, so we want to make sure that there's going to be adequate water available in that pie slice for the future. Global population, I'm sure you know, is expanding. The latest thing that I heard from the UN last week is we're going to hit 9.6 billion by 2050. Where are all those people going to live? What are they going to eat? Some of those people are going to move to Canada. A number of them are going to move to the Okanagan. Right now, the Okanagan is home to about 315,000 people, and we're projected to grow by 50% within that time frame. And that's a pretty conservative projection. BC right now is about 50% food secure, which means that we produce about half of the food that we need to support our population. But if we continue to grow in numbers of people, we're going to need to be able to grow in food production. That means we're more irrigation rather than less irrigation. They're going to need a bigger slice of the pie. We're going to need better irrigation technology to support this kind of demand. The most dramatic slide, the most dramatic graph that came out of our entire 4-year study, which is still ongoing, was looking at the difference between the, if the population grows at expected rates, and if we develop in the same pattern that we do now, so we have small single-family houses with regular little yards around them. If we just continue doing what we're doing, by 2040, the outdoor lawn watering is going to, the amount of water that they need for that is as much as water we currently use for that, all the fruit and wine and agriculture that we now have in the Okanagan. So if we continue on the current trends, we're going to be eating into that agricultural productivity slice. So, are water shortages optional? Well, really it comes down to a social choice. Where do you want to use your water? What kind of risks do you want to take? To prevent water shortages, we really are going to need to have all the Okanagan municipalities take a long, hard look at development patterns and focus on infill instead of sprawl. It will take collaboration between the different municipalities and coordination. Looking at the numbers again, this lovely pie chart, you can see right here we have the domestic indoor water use is 7%. And outdoor use takes up 24% of our current water use. You could double the population in the Okanagan, double it, just if you got everybody to cut their lawn size down by a third. It's not a hard choice to make. So that's good news for the people who want to see growth in the valley, who want to see development and real estate and more workers coming in, young people. But really they have to focus on higher density development. So these are shared problems. They need shared solutions. The municipalities have to work together with other levels of government, certainly with the agricultural industry, with business community, educational institutions, and the public to protect our common future. The next big challenge for the Okanagan Basin Water Board is to help integrate all this scientific work that we've been doing into the planning processes of the local governments. So working on things like interregional growth strategies, coordinated drought plans, harmonizing water bylaws, getting common messaging for water conservation, universal metering, groundwater regulation, and the last kind of big problem with water quality, which is stormwater management. Floodplain mapping also needs to be done collaboratively because we're directly affected by the neighbors who are upstream for us, how much water they're using, how much runoff they have, and how the dams are managed. You can see from the bow here in Calgary that it's difficult to really manage water, and one day or another the river will go where it wants. But we can definitely find ways to prepare. I heard I was reading this morning in a paper about the response to Hurricane Sandy, and they're not just talking about recovery efforts anymore. Now they're using a phrase, resilience efforts. So the amount of funding that they put towards preventing that kind of damage to happen in the future, whether it's droughts or floods. And any way we look at it, the future is going to be more expensive. Everything is getting more expensive. There's fewer resources to go around, and costs are going up. But there's many, many resources that exist that we're not using to the full capacity. There's money in our communities. We live in a wealthy nation. But more importantly, the resources of new ideas and the resources of people. One of the things that we've been really lucky about is having a whole lot of very committed, very intelligent people wanting to work on these problems with us. One of the mottos in our office is not just doing more with less, it's doing more regardless. These things have to happen. We have to find a way to make them happen. And if we don't think that things can change rapidly, we just have to look at how quickly things have changed within one lifetime. This was in the 1930s in Penticton. It's a different world. And that's within the age of people who are still alive now. So I want to leave you with this message here. We can do it. Thank you.